Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees.
And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 181, The Youngest Australian VC Recipient. A friend loaned me a CD of a local production called The Passing Out Parade, and this was through research from the Deniliquin Creative Writers Group, who developed short stories on a range of servicemen and women in the Deniliquin region. I didn't realise that this valuable local history resource existed, and there is soon to be a book that's coming out. So I made the decision to delve more deeply into a few of the people that were featured in this CD. This one particularly struck me. John William Alexander Jackson, known as Bill, Billy and Jacko, was born on the 13th of September 1897 at Glengower Station, Gunbar in New South Wales, on the road from Hay to West Wyalong. He was the fourth of 8 children, born to parents John Jackson and Adelaide Ann McFarlane. 6 of those 8 children survived infancy. Bill had an older surviving sister, Elizabeth, and his younger siblings were Catherine, Albert, Adelaide and Leslie. Bill's mother died when he was 8, so the children were raised by his maternal grandparents at a property nearby called Seaton Park. Bill was educated at the one-room Gunbar school. Gunbar had a very small population, just 4 houses in 1914, when World War I broke out. By the time Bill was 16 years and 10 months, he was working at Carlowry Station. He was remembered as a strong and recklessly daring teen, and he quit his job as a drover with William Gibson on that station with his father's consent and joined a group of men from Gunbar to set off to Sydney to enlist. They were the first to enlist from the town for World War I. Bill enlisted on the 15th of February 1915. He gave his age at 18 years and 5 months instead of 17 years and 5 months in order to enlist. He was described as 5'11", with fair complexion, blue eyes and fair hair. On signing up, he was ranked as a private and assigned to the 17th Infantry Battalion B Company, part of the 5th Brigade, 2nd Division. He completed his training at the Liverpool camp and then he embarked from Sydney on the HMAT Themistocles on the 12th of May 1915. On the 12th of June, he disembarked at Suez, Egypt, and proceeded to Aerodrome Camp at Heliopolis, which he described as hot, dirty, and nothing but sand. And the advanced training was a good deal harder than the Australian training. Bill was detailed for special duty at Alexandria on the 12th of August 1915, and then 3 days later embarked with his battalion from Alexandria for Gallipoli on the HMT Alunia. They arrived at Lemnos Island 2 days later, where the next day they transshipped to a smaller vessel, the SS El Kahira. They arrived at Anzac Cove at 5 a.m. on the 19th of August and then proceeded to Reserve Gully, then on to Happy Valley, where the 5th Brigade was attached for temporary duty to the 4th Brigade. The battalion arrived at Borchops Hill at 9:30 p.m. on the 20th of August. The next day they moved to the crater and took part in the Battle of Hill 60. Casualties for the battalion at the end of this action were 1 officer and 3 other ranks killed, along with 2 officers and 23 other ranks wounded. The battalion moved to Otago Gully on the 2nd of September and then 2 days later moved to take over the positions at Pope's Post and Quinn's Post. On the 8th of September, the 5th Brigade reverted to the 2nd Division. On the 3rd of October 1915, Bill was admitted to the 1st Australian Casualty Clearing Station at Anzac Cove, suffering from diarrhoea and a problem with his teeth, which prevented him from eating the hard rations that were being provided at the time on Gallipoli. He was placed on board the hospital ship HMHS Assay. He was admitted to St Patrick's Hospital at Malta on the 10th of October, and then he was transferred to the Garntifa convalescent camp on the 3rd of November. Bill embarked from Malta on the 7th of January 1916 on the HMHS Essequibo and disembarked at Egypt, where he was admitted to the 1st Australian General Hospital at Heliopolis. He was discharged to duty on the 15th of February and rejoined his battalion at the Milescar camp on the 8th of March. Just over a week later, the whole battalion embarked for Alexandria for France on the HMT Arcadian. They disembarked at Marseille on the 23rd of March. They moved to Erquighem on the 7th of April and then proceeded to Boigrenia, just south of Armentes, where they took over the frontline trenches on the 10th of April. This was their first action in France, and the Australian and German frontline trenches were only 200 to 300 yards apart. As a prelude to what became known as the Battle of the Somme, orders were issued for raids to be carried out on enemy positions. The 5th Brigade were engaged in raids on the enemy, and one was planned for the night of the 25th and 26th of June that involved 69 officers and other ranks drawn from 4 battalions of the 5th Brigade, which included the 17th Battalion. The aim was to capture prisoners to gather information from them. All of the men were volunteers, and they were pulled out of the line and spent 3 weeks training for the raid. Bill volunteered to be one of the scouts that involved 40 soldiers led by Captain Keith Heritage. Their job was to go forward ahead of the rest of the party into no man's land and knock out enemy listening posts. They also lay white tape on the ground so that their party could find their way back to their own trenches. The scouting party were constantly exposed to the enemy in their attacks. The raid was successful. Over 30 Germans were killed and 4 prisoners were captured. A year after the event, Bill explained in recollection, "It was pitch dark. It suited me. I see well in the dark. They weren't expecting us, and we got our prisoners all right, 4 of them, but the Germans got onto us as we were going back." So Bill captured one of the enemy himself, and he returned safely with him through the 365-metre no man's land to his own lines, despite the intense barrage of enemy shell and machine gun fire. On learning that some of his party had been hit, Bill immediately returned into the enemy barrage and rescued one of his wounded comrades. Bill said, "I didn't like the idea of leaving any wounded men out in no man's land." On his second rescue mission, while still ignoring the intensifying bombardment, he was assisting Sergeant Hugh Camden to bring in a seriously wounded Private Robinson. A blast from an exploding shell blew off Bill's right arm above the elbow. Bill said he didn't feel much, just a numbing sensation. It caused further injuries to Private Robinson, and it rendered Sergeant Camden temporarily unconscious. In spite of his frightful injury, Bill returned to his lines where an officer applied a tourniquet to his arm using a piece of string and a stick. Bill went out again and assisted Robinson and Camden back to their lines. Bill continued to search for another half an hour until he was satisfied that all the wounded had been brought in, and then he was sent to hospital. Bill was evacuated and admitted to the 2nd Canadian Stationary Hospital at Outreau on the 17th of June, and then 2 days later was evacuated from Boulogne on the HMHS St Patrick to England, where he was admitted to the 3rd London General Hospital on the 29th of June. The following day he had the stump of his right arm amputated. On the 20th of July he was transferred to the 1st Australian Auxiliary Hospital at Harefield, and then in the early September, he was transferred to the 2nd Australian Auxiliary Hospital at Southall. And it was while he was there on the 8th of September 1916 that he was awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions on the night of the raid that cost him his arm. The announcement came 5 days before his 19th birthday. As well as being awarded, he was the youngest Australian recipient of the Victoria Cross. He was also the only soldier of the 17th Battalion to have been decorated with this medal during World War I. And from the dispatches, it reads, "Action for which commended. For his gallantry on the night of the 25th and 26th of July 1916 in rescuing wounded men under fire, while returning from a successful raid on the German trenches south of Armentières, several members of the raiding party were seriously wounded in no man's land by shell fire. Private Jackson returned safely to our lines through a most intense barrage of shell fire shrapnel and crossed machine gun fire escorting a prisoner. Hearing that some of his party had been hit, Private Jackson handed his prisoner over and immediately returned into no man's land, into the enemy's barrage, and assisted in bringing in a wounded man. He then went out again, notwithstanding that the hostile bombardment was more intense than ever, and with Sergeant Camden, 19th Battalion, was bringing in Private Robinson, who was seriously wounded, when a shell exploded close to Private Jackson's right arm and it was blown off above the elbow. Robinson was wounded again and Sergeant Camden knocked unconscious. As Jackson could not do anything by himself, he returned to our trenches, obtained assistance, and went out again to search for his two comrades. They were, however, met just outside the trenches. Private Jackson's condition was serious, but throughout he showed wonderful fortitude. His work with the raiding party as a scout and also with his battalion in the same capacity has always been of the highest order, marked with great coolness, dash and bravery. And Charles Bean, the well-known war historian, and he told how Jackson won the VC in the early part of the Somme battle. The raid was the occasion of an act of signal gallantry by an Australian soldier on behalf of his comrades. A young private of the 17th Battalion, Australian Infantry, William Jackson, a boy who joined at 17 from the New South Wales backcountry, after escorting a prisoner across no man's land, was carrying wounded men between the trenches under heavy shell fire when on the third journey he was terribly wounded in the arm. Two of his mates, however, were still lying in front of the trench, and he again went out to search for them. The Hay newspaper, the Riverine Grazier, on the 22nd of September 1916, reported the award. Private William Jackson is the oldest son of Mr. John Jackson of Gunbar. He was born on the 13th of September 1897 at Glengower Station, Gunbar, and is consequently not quite 19 years of age. His mother's maiden name was Adelaide Ann McFarlane, and she too was a native of Gunbar, where the young soldier spent all of his life prior to enlisting. His father was a native of Sydney. Mrs. Jackson, his mother, died about 11 years ago. The young hero's full name is John William Alexander Jackson. Both his father and his mother's people are well known about Gunbar, and the district can fairly lay claim to the recipient of the greatest of all military honours as a district boy. Private Jackson is a fine specimen of Australian youth, physically, and prior to volunteering, he had a local reputation for strength and reckless daring. 2 weeks later, Bill and Sergeant Hugh Camden were both awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal, the DCM, for their actions in the June raid, but Bill's DCM was later cancelled. This would later become an issue due to a bureaucratic blunder. On the 26th of October, Bill was transferred to Queen Mary's Hospital at Roehampton, which specialised in the rehabilitation of soldiers who had lost limbs. On the 18th of November, Bill was invested with his Victoria Cross by King George VI at Buckingham Palace. In early December, he proceeded to the Southall Hospital, and then he was discharged to headquarters in mid-February 1917, but was readmitted into hospital in the late March. He was discharged from hospital on the 5th of April for his return to Australia and embarked from Devonport on the 4th of May on the HMAT Themistocles, the same ship that he'd left Australia on 2 years earlier. At a reception in Sydney for the returned soldiers, held at the Anzac Buffet in the Domain, Bill was hoisted shoulder high and singled out for great honour. His uncle, George Gale, commented at the reception, "You never know what virtues may come out of the most unsuspected places, nor what heroes may spring up out of the smallest village. Gunbar, a little place of 4 houses, not even a blacksmith shop or a pub. My nephew had never seen a train until he enlisted." He travelled on a train to Hay, accompanied by his comrade Sergeant Camden, and they were met at the railway station by a large crowd who enthusiastically cheered the returned hero. They were officially welcomed in front of the post office, upon which Hugh spoke of the comrade's selfless courage. Bill was not looking for a VC that night, he was looking for a cobber. That evening, Bill and Hugh dined with local dignitaries at the Tattersalls Hotel on a table covered with a Union Jack and table napkins folded in the form of military tents. Upon his return to Gunbar, Bill was met once more with great celebration and pride. Gunbar had been experiencing hard times. A period of close settlement in the last decades of the previous century had ended, due to drought and the realities of farming marginal land. Businesses had closed and many of the original selectors and their descendants had left the district, and the trend was towards larger holdings and fewer people. Despite this, Jackson was met with great celebration and pride on his return. The residents sought to show their appreciation of Jackson by buying him a farming property in the area, but he declined their offer, believing the loss of his arm rendered him incapable of work on the land. Bill was discharged from service on the 15th of September 1917, however he remained faithful in serving his fellow soldiers. On Red Cross Day 1918, Bill endeavoured to raise funds for the welfare of returned soldiers by selling cardboard Victoria Crosses. On the back of each one, he carefully signed with his left hand, W. Jackson VC DCM. He also sold kisses for 5 shillings each during at least one charity drive in 1918. Because of his shyness, some women paid the money but did not claim their prize. After all, the money was being collected for charity, and they raised £1,000 for Red Cross Day in the last year of World War One. Several of the paper copies of Private William Jackson's Victoria Cross are now held in the collection at the State Library of New South Wales, complete with his signature on the back. Late in 1918, he was the licensee of the Harp Hotel in Corrimal Street, Wollongong. His tenancy at the Harp Hotel was exceedingly short, and he decamped for pastures new as early as March 1919. A question that a family researcher asked was how would it be possible that William Jackson would have enough money to pay for a hotel licence in Wollongong just 3 years after he returned from the war? And their guess is that Jackson was simply acting as an agent, as the former licensee, Thomas James Woods, was having some issues and had no lease of the premises. And when a lease was prepared, a hitch had occurred. Wood had gained the licence in 1913 after moving to Newtown, but the second problem was that Thomas Wood objected to paying the licence fee of £40 per annum, and the other issue was that no objection would be taken to the renewal provided a guarantee was given that the premises would be painted and repaired. So Thomas Wood's solicitor said a lease was being prepared for 9 years for £900 and a rental of £4 10 shillings a week. Repairs to the extent of £250 would be carried out, the landlord to pay for the outside of the building and the tenant for the inside. There was an advertisement for the Harp Hotel in the Illawarra Mercury in January 1919. The Harp Hotel, Wollongong. This hotel has been thoroughly renovated and refurnished and is now conducted by a private W. Jackson VC DCM, whose aim it will be to conduct the hotel in a manner to secure the support of locals and other visitors to the town, desirous of securing comfortable accommodation. The domestic arrangements will be supplied by Miss Jackson, whose aim it will be to accommodate the visitors of the hotel. He had 5 surviving siblings at this time, so we're assuming his sister may have come to help him out. The proximity of this hotel to the golf links, surf beach and bowling green makes it an ideal place for visitors. Customers can absolutely rely on the quality of any drink that they are served with and on getting what they asked for. The Harp Hotel, Wollongong. So by the end of January 1919, the Wollongong premises was being called Jackson's Harp Hotel, and there's a great photo from the University of New England and Regional Archives that shows a crowd outside and having signage saying Jackson VC. And on the 16th of November 1917, in the Gilgandra Weekly, a New South Wales paper, an E.M. Ward, who watched Jackson growing up in Gunbar, expressed his feelings by penning a brief poem for him. Private Jackson VC. I knew him as an infant, I've nursed him on my knee, and now he is a hero with the glorious VC. I took his hand in greeting when he arrived today. My thoughts flew back to Gunbar so many miles away. The days we roamed together without a thought or pain, those happy days are over, they will never come again. To me seems the baby I knew in days of old, but he has grown to manhood now and he is brave and bold. He lost his arm in battle fighting for you and me. He did a brave and glorious deed and won the coveted VC. I cannot write, I'm thinking of years that have gone past since I first knew Private Jackson and when I saw him last. Another way, these men were celebrated by ceremonies and dinners that were held in their honour. On the 11th of November 1919, around 14 recipients of the Victoria Cross attended a dinner in the company of the prominent surgeon Sir Charles Kinnaird McKellar, father of the poet Dorothea McKellar. All the men signed an autograph book for the occasion, which was later presented to Sir Charles McKellar, which is held in the State Library. So due to drought and his disability, Bill was no longer able to work on local farms, so he moved to Merriwa, New South Wales, where he dealt in horses and animal skins, which at that time was actually illegal. His father joined him at Merriwa, and it was reported in Wollongong in August 1922 that Jackson VC, who at one time kept the Harp Hotel at Wollongong, is now on the land out in the back blocks. For a time his war pension was being paid at the Merriwa Post Office, even though his father then claimed to be unaware of his current whereabouts. In March 1927, Bill and 10 other New South Wales resident VCs gathered at Government House, Sydney, to greet the HRH, the Duke of York, and the future King George VI Sydney visit. A month later, Bill was one of the 23 VCs who attended a function hosted by the Duke of York at the Melbourne Exhibition Building. In requesting a replacement copy of his discharge certificate, he said the original was lost in the 1926 house fire. The staff at Army Office realised they'd never issued Bill with his Victory Medal. And if you look carefully at a photo of Bill, you'll notice that he does not have a ribbon there. In February 1929, while he was a patient in Sydney's Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, Bill met Ivy Muriel Elmer Morris, a dressmaker who was 11 years younger than Bill. With the Great Depression hitting hard, he moved to Kensington, a suburb of Sydney, after his Merriwa home burnt down, to be close to members of his father's extended family and closer to Ivy. He managed a greengrocery business and also worked as a clerk at the Metropolitan Water, Sewerage and Drainage Board. On the 12th of January 1932, Bill and Ivy married at St Paul's Church of England, Anglican Church, Kogarah, New South Wales, Ivy 24 and Bill 35. Bill showed that he lost none of his larrikin character when he had his cattle dog, Jackie, stand in as best man. The couple made their home initially at St George Parade, Hurstville, near Ivy's family. And a couple of articles related to the wedding. In the Scone Advocate on the 15th of January 1932, Mr. William J. Jackson, an Australian VC, and for a time who resided in the Merriwa district and periodically visited Scone, was married in the city on Tuesday to Miss Ivy Muriel Morris. Jackson explained the romance began at the Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, where relatives of Miss Morris and himself were inmates 16 months back. Mr. J.J. Clasby, recently elected MHR for East Sydney, a warmate and companion in recruiting, was to have been best man, but owing to his serious illness was absent. And in the Casino and Kyogle Courier, a North Coast Advertiser, an article titled Dog as Best Man. Mr. William John Jackson VC was married on Tuesday. The bride, Miss Ivy Muriel Morris, and Jackson's pet cattle dog was best man. The bride's mother was the only person in attendance. The bride's mother knew nothing of the marriage until an hour before the ceremony. Then Digger Jackson packed his bride, his future mother-in-law, and Jackie, the faithful cattle dog, into a train and took them to Kogarah. Jackie was my best man, Jackson said. I reared him and he had to go. Jackson won his VC in the early part of the Somme battle, where he rescued several wounded men from no man's land, although severely wounded himself. Their only child was born later in that year, a daughter that they named Dorothea. In 1937, Bill was awarded the King George VI Coronation Medal. On the 31st of March 1941, Bill enlisted in World War II at Paddington, New South Wales, aged 43. He was ranked a private and he was appointed to a specialist group. He was promoted corporal on the 15th of May 1941 and a month later transferred to the East Northern Command Provost Company at the Victoria Barracks in Paddington as a corporal and acting sergeant. However, an article in the Daily Mirror on the 2nd of October 1941 gave an understanding as to what was happening on the personal front. VC bound over. VC winner in the last war, one-armed William John Jackson of Vine Street, Hurstville, was bound over to keep the peace for 6 months at the Kogarah court this afternoon for assaulting his wife. Mr. L.C. Abigail, who appeared for his wife, Mrs. Ivy Muriel Jackson, said that Jackson, now a member of the Home Defence Forces at the recruiting depot at Moore Park, had a violent temper. He has only one arm, but that does not hinder him in the least, he said. Mr. Gannon stated that Jackson had not lived with his wife since the hubbub. They had not lived happily together for 10 years. After conferring, Council announced an agreement has been reached between the parties. There was a lot going on for him at this point, as in December 1941, Bill was interrogated regarding his right to wear a DCM ribbon. He denied any knowledge that the award had been cancelled and replied that he would continue to wear all of his medals. It eventually resulted in his requesting a discharge amidst the threat of taking the matter to court. Now, how did that come about? Well, the problem arose because Bill and his father share the first name John. To try and avoid any confusion, John Jr. had grown up with the name Billy and then became Bill as an adult. Several years after Bill's discharge in September 1917, the Army directed all mail to John Jackson, so his father received all the letters, including the one that advised Bill that his DCM had been cancelled due to his VC medal. In trying to rectify what seems to be a bureaucratic error, the AIF asked John Jackson to return the official DCM award notification he'd been sent, but John Jackson, Bill's father, claimed it was no longer in his possession. So that's when Bill applied for a discharge, which was granted on the 30th of March 1942. The Army may have relented, probably on the advice from the War Office in London, because Bill re-enlisted at Paddington 3 weeks later on the 16th of April 1942. His rank was corporal and he was assigned to the 2nd Australian Labor Company. Bill transferred to the headquarters of the Volunteer Defence Corps on the 1st of June 1942, then at his own request, discharged from the service on the 14th of September 1942 with the rank of acting sergeant. In June 1942, after the Japanese mini-submarines had entered Sydney Harbour, Bill dispatched Ivy and Dorothea to Merriwa. He joined them there in this September. Returning to Sydney from a skin-buying trip to Wollongong during the evening of the 5th of October 1946, Bill was driving a motor lorry through fog and light rain at Waterfall when he was involved in a 4-vehicle accident. Bill suffered only minor injuries, but 2 people were killed in the accident, and Bill was charged with manslaughter, driving in a dangerous manner, and negligent driving. He appeared before the Wollongong Court of Quarter Sessions, charged with 2 counts of manslaughter on the 13th of May 1947. Evidence revealed that Bill was driving the lorry fitted with accordance with a restricted licence that he'd held for 5 months. It was the first accident he'd been involved in during the 30 years he'd been driving, and due to the poor weather conditions, all drivers were driving at 40 kilometres per hour. The judge, Judge Neild, a former member of the 17th Battalion, disclosed to the jury that he knew Bill's reputation as a soldier, and this was causing him some embarrassment during the trial. He directed them to return their verdict, not on anything that he said, but purely on the facts of the case. The jury returned a verdict of not guilty. This ordeal would have played havoc with Bill's mental and physical health and sent him back, arguably indefinitely. And on the 6th of May 1949 in the Sydney Daily Mirror, William Jackson, VC, has his ups and downs. Mr. William Jackson, 51 of Hurstville, winner of the Victoria Cross and DCM in World War I, is working as a lift driver in a leading city store because he likes to meet people. However, in the 3 months he has been a lift driver, only one person has recognised the insignia on his coat lapel. Meeting people has been Mr. Jackson's hobby for the past 25 years, in which he's also been a hotel keeper, a farmer, a skin buyer and a fruiterer. At 17, Mr. Jackson was the youngest holder of a VC of the British Empire, winning the Medal for Conspicuous Bravery at Bowls Grenier, where he lost his right arm. He enlisted at Hay, New South Wales at the age of 16. Since selling his fruit shop in King Street City last June to a World War II ex-serviceman, Mr. Jackson's travelled 11,500 miles throughout Australia by train and motor coach. Married with a 16-year-old daughter, Mr. Jackson said today, "I would like to buy another fruit shop, but the refugees are getting in first. If I had £1,000 to buy a business, some refugee would come along with £2,000 and get it." So 3 years later, his daughter Dorothea married James William Parks in Hurstville on the 29th of November 1952, and the wedding was announced in the paper in January 1953. At the Hurstville Presbyterian Church, Miss Dorothea Ann Jackson, only child of Mr. and Mrs. W. Jackson of Vine Street, Hurstville, was married to Mr. James William Parks, only son of Mr. and Mrs. A. Parks of Railway Parade, Carlton. By 1953, Bill had moved to Melbourne and he and Ivy had become estranged, and he worked as a commissionaire at Melbourne Town Hall. In August of that year, the new Governor-General of Australia, Field Marshal Sir William Slim, a Military Cross recipient from the First World War, on his way to a civic reception as the guest of honour, noticed his lift driver was wearing a VC ribbon, and he chatted to Bill at length, despite the waiting civic dignitaries. Bill continued as a valued employer of the Melbourne City Council for the next 8 years. And in 1953, he also was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Coronation Medal. During the 1954 Royal Tour of Australia, he was given several honoured roles. He introduced the royal couple when they visited the Anzac Memorial in Hyde Park, and in Melbourne, where he unfurled the royal standard as the Queen stepped from her car on arrival at the Melbourne Town Hall. Bill and Ivy's marriage was finally dissolved in 1955, and Ivy remarried in 1962 to Andrew Jones in Hurstville, New South Wales. In 1956, the Melbourne City Council granted Bill 6 months' leave on full pay to allow him to sail on the SS Oracles with 33 other VC recipients to attend the VC centenary celebrations in England. He was seriously ill during the voyage and on arrival in England was admitted to a London hospital for 6 weeks. He was only allowed out to attend a garden party given by Queen Elizabeth at Marlborough House in Pall Mall on the 26th of June before he was flown home. After recovering, he returned to work at the Melbourne Town Hall. On the 4th of August 1959, Bill collapsed at the Melbourne Town Hall and was taken to Austin Hospital, where he passed away of heart disease later that day, aged only 61. His remains were cremated at the Springvale Cemetery with full military honours and his ashes placed in the Baronia Gardens. Bill had been living with his father at Ivanhoe in Victoria, and he was a member of the Carlton sub-branch of the RSL. Bill is commemorated on several memorials at the Gunbar District Roll of Honour of World War I, the Gunbar Presbyterian Church Roll of Honour World War I, North Bondi War Memorial, the Victoria Cross Memorial located in the Queen Victoria Building in Sydney. He has a park named after him, the private Jackson Park that's located at Gungal, south of Merriwa, and it's a rest area and features a stone monument with a plaque dedicated to him. He's also commemorated on the Winchelsea World War I Memorial in Victoria, the John Hamilton VC Pictorial Honour Roll and the Hall of Valour, both located at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. A unique memorial commemorating Bill and his fellow Australian VC recipients is also found at the National Memorial Orbitum at Elrewis, Staffordshire, UK, where they have engraved their names on individual paving stones. Nor is Jackson forgotten in Hay. The school museum has a framed photograph and a biography of him. The members bar in the Merriwa RSL Club is named the Jackson VC Bar. Displayed near the bar is a framed photograph of Bill and a duplicate set of medals, one of which is the DCM. So in the end, John William Alexander Jackson was awarded for service in World War I with a Victoria Cross, a 1914 and 1915 Star, a British War Medal, a Victory Medal and an Anzac Commemorative Medallion. For his service in World War II, he was awarded the War Medal and the Australia Service Medal. In April 2008, Bill's Australian Victoria Cross Medal failed to attract a single bid. It was for sale by Bonham and Goodman in Sydney, and it had already been up for sale in November 2007 and again attracted no bids. So the second attempt in April 2008, it said that the World War I VC offered on behalf of the recipient's descendants at an auction held in Sydney was estimated to sell for $700,000. It was awarded to William Jackson, who lost an arm in helping to recover his injured mates under fire in no man's land south of Armentières in France in 1916. Aged 19, Jackson was the youngest Australian to be awarded a VC. While this was awarded to Australia's youngest recipient, it does not have the glamour of some of the more expensive specimens and had been offered to the market before. The Jackson VC was first offered for sale in the Trading Post newspaper last year for $1.2 million. The amount that had been paid for Captain Alfred Shout's medal in late 2006. The Jackson grandchildren originally consigned their VC to Bonham and Goodman but withdrew it after Bonham and Goodman suggested an estimate of £800,000. It says they apparently wanted more. Noble Numismatics Managing Director Jim Noble said that the family had left the medal for sale with his company. And a month after, on the 28th of May 2008, Bill's Victoria Cross and campaign medals were sold privately to an Australian collector, Barry Hibbard. He was a coin collector from New South Wales and it was sold for $650,000. By Australian law, the medal must remain in Australia. And in the article it said that Steve Gower, the director of the Australian War Memorial, said, "I understand families wishing to realise on a family possession, but it's all become rather unfortunate that a monetary value is being placed on bravery of the highest level. That aside, the Australian War Memorial remains very grateful that there's been individuals in their community that have been prepared to purchase and donate significant medals. This makes us more appreciative of families who have chosen to donate their Victoria Crosses so that all Australians can view them here at the memorial and be inspired by these men's actions." And on the 24th of June 2016, it says the current holder of the William Jackson Victoria Cross Medal has now decided to loan the group of medals to the Australian War Memorial in Canberra, and the VC will go on display in the Hall of Valour. So what an amazing story of Bill Jacko Jackson, coming from such a small farming area and reaching the heights of being a VC recipient.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.